Okay, so welcome. We are here. Thank you for watching District 4, To the Point for Information and News. I am your host, A-Love. We're going backwards a little bit because we're going to cover Diddy trial information or Diddy progression information. And it's only because it involves President 47. All right. Now, the interesting thing is, before I start all of this, and do make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and all of these things. And I do want to give people time to come in by giving some backstory. We all know that this trial sort of took place, and it was regarding this sort of RICO scenario. We all know this. And we understand, because we all followed the trial. Everybody went through it, and these are federal charges, and we talked about Puffy's jail, and the place that he was being housed was the same place R. Kelly was being housed for the similar type of charge, and how bad that prison was. It had been sued, I think, in 2021, and how bad it was. So we've covered every detail. And as this trial was going on, the question was asked to 47, which is our president. And they asked him because they wanted to know if Puffy was convicted, would he allow him to have a pardon? And he said, yeah, I think so. We used to be friends and all of these things. And I think that, maybe that one would be warranted. And it was sort of like not a solid answer, only because there was a period of time where Puffy actually sort of denounced his friendship with 47. And he kind of went in on him at one point, and I don't know if he ever actually said his name, but he did. And it was kind of this thing where he just did it. So that's I say all that to say this is why I decided to cover this morning, because the defense team for Sean Diddy Combs has reached out to 47, President Donald Trump, seeking a pardon as his conviction on prostitution-related offenses, and it has happened really today in an official way. Now, unofficially, the question was asked, and unofficially, some people said, well, maybe we might, maybe we won't. But it's official now. They literally, the legal team, when your legal team reaches out to 47, that means it's on paper. That means it's documented. So this is documentation we have going on here, where we have 47 really being officially asked, could he pardon Diddy? Now, this situation of the pardon, let's talk about how rare it should be to get a pardon. Before I go into that, because I want to use as an example one of the stories. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in. We're talking Diddy asking officially for a pardon. His legal team came in, asked for a pardon. And you would think when this question was asked, it was rather just a kind of a frivolous question. It was just kind of something that was asked off the cuff and answered to off the cuff. But they don't skip a beat, that legal team. So they really just went in and said, can we get a pardon? But let me tell you how rare this is to ask this question necessarily, even in an official way. And it's not to say that people don't ask it, but under what circumstances are they asking it? And I'll give you the case of, we're going to have to go with Tookie Williams. And Tookie Williams was the gang leader of the Bloods. He helped to start it. He was one of the main people. There were a lot of murders committed at that time. There were a lot of crimes committed at that time. They were a gang. That's what they did. In prison, Mr. Williams turned his life around. Now, we all remember this story. He started writing children's books. He started helping other inmates. He found, the Lord. He, had legitly, had support from other celebrities, and all of these type of things. This is talking about Tookie Williams. he asked for a pardon because you're thinking, oh my God, if anybody should get a pardon, it should be this type of person, right? It was denied. He did not get the pardon. Tookie Williams, speaking of, for those of you just coming in here. Just to relay, we're talking about Puffy Combs' legal team reaching out to 47 and asking for a pardon. I'm telling the story of Tookie Williams. Tookie Williams had really turned his life around. Everything was different for him at that time. We went, through the whole process of that. And he got support from like celebrities and just other lawyers, and just everybody rallied around Tookie Williams at the time. It was a big deal. Some of the public people also rallied around him. He was denied a pardon. Denied. Ultimately, because he was denied the pardon, ultimately sent to death and killed. Because that was his sentence, right? He walked the green mile, so to speak. Now, I say all this for obvious reasons, because the man had actually changed, meaning Tookie Williams we're talking about right now. We're using pardons and these sort of examples of a pardon. Tookie Williams had actually turned his life around. I mean, it had been happening for years. He didn't anticipate, he wasn't looking for anything. He was already sentenced, all of these things. The reason for this, they stated, was because he has to go to jail for the crimes that he committed, which he was already convicted of. Okay, he meaning Tookie Williams, cannot now change his life and get a pardon. And nobody could believe it, because we were like, isn't this what these types of actions, especially legally, are for? Aren't they for people that have turned their life around and, started giving back to society and learned the error of their ways? And, he was young when all this happened. This man was in his 20s and, and everybody said, no, absolutely not. He was a gang member, and I don't care if he was in his 20s. He's going, that's it. That's it for him. This is what happens, right? Well, we have Puffy asking for the same thing that this man that had turned his life around after many, many years of having been penalized for the crimes committed, not just by himself, but by the people that had been around him. How realistic? Has he even had a chance? Do we know what that means to turn your life around over time? It doesn't happen this fast. So a pardon is basically being asked for Mr. Combs, and I'm not saying, I'm neutral every time, for his friend to give him a pardon. Ex-friend, because literally he had already come out and spoke against him. So he's asking his ex-friend, who said, I will give him a pardon, or he should be able to get a pardon, for something that wasn't even given to a man that had turned his life around for years. Comments, because and I'm not saying whether it was right or wrong. I'm just saying almost the strikingness of this particular situation, because of the type of convictions, because of him already being somewhat, not even accountable, but just maybe feeling more redemptive about him meaning Puffy or Diddy. There's no ability or time to show that he's turned his life around. There's just time that just wasn't there. When asked about the pardons during the interview with Newsmax, this was on Friday, 47 said, and I'm quoting now, they have talked to me about Sean, end quote, but did not announce any decision. So he didn't necessarily say what he was going to do, although he had alluded to it earlier, which is probably why they're asking for this pardon, because he meaning 47, did allude to him and Puffy having been friends, and, yes, he might give him one. Hello, yes. Yes, comments. You think it's a stretch. What is a stretch? You mean a stretch for Puffy? It's not a stretch for him to ask. That's not what I'm saying. Absolutely not saying that at all. That's not a stretch. I'm not saying it's a stretch for Puffy to ask or Diddy to ask. I'm saying under what circumstances did this pardon, which should be was not given to somebody like Tookie Williams, and it gets extended, say for example, to Puffy. How do we feel about this particular scenario? And I'm not saying that some people will go automatically in and say yes, he should be pardoned. Are you? Oh, some of you people are saying that. Tell me why you're thinking he should be pardoned. Because he did. No, he wasn't found innocent of these charges. No, you can't get a pardon if you're found innocent. He was found innocent of the RICO charges. He meaning Sean Combs, for those of you just coming in. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. We are going over the pardon that was asked of President by Puffy Combs' legal team. It just happened recently. So I know who Tookie Williams is. Tookie Williams was the leader of the Bloods, had gone to jail, convicted of many crimes, and so to speak, federal, executed after asking for a pardon. That's where we are in the story right now for those of you that are asking what just happened. That is what happened. But I went in and said that Puffy had denounced 47. And somebody saying he should, no, he was not, and I'm clarified for those of you that keep saying, but he was found innocent. He was found innocent, he meaning Diddy was found innocent of the RICO charges, but he was convicted of the other charges, related charges, okay? Not necessarily sex trafficking necessarily, but he was pardoned of the prostitution-related offenses, the Mann Act, so to speak. So a pardon can be asked for. I mean, it wasn't like an innocent man is asking to be pardoned. He was convicted of some things. But he went in for the kill when you asked to be basically relieved of the charges. Not after what he did to Cassie. It wasn't just Cassie that, but again, a lot of people, yeah, some people said he definitely should be in there. A lot of people are saying, tell me the people that are saying that he shouldn't, he should be pardoned. Tell me why you think he should be pardoned. And the people that feel like he should be, somebody said he should be locked under the jail. Somebody said they think he was really guilty, but just got off because of a legal technicality. Which was the legal technicality? You know, I know the law, so it wasn't a legal technicality. I mean, there was a juror, so the jury gets to decide, and that's how a jury of your peers. That's how it works. So that it's really there. Don't give him any more breaks. I don't know if we actually gave him a break. Why did his legal team? Well, the legal team has to officially do it. I mean, if you have one, you can ask for a pardon, but that's paperwork. He has a lawyer. He doesn't have to. Oh, you mean why didn't he go to 47 and ask him? Who knows? Does he have access to 47 like that? Somebody answer that question. I mean, does he have access to 47 in order to personally ask him, or did he want to make it more formal and just make sure it's an official ask? This is not to say that you can't go talk behind the scenes and then make it official charge, but it wasn't done that way. It was done through the actual legal team. So I didn't cover the verdict because it was covered by a lot of people, and I just thought that we got the point of what it was. So I didn't come in to do that. I also didn't have the time to actually go in there to go over that, but we can cover, any thoughts or feelings about any part of what's going on now. Let me ask you guys this. What do you think is going to happen if Puffy gets out of jail? Somebody give me some feedback on it. Hi. Thank you. Somebody said they clicked the notification bell. I appreciate you. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. It helps a lot. Let's just start while you guys are answering that. Let's just start by defining pardons. Okay. So a pardon is an official act of, this is coming from literally the statute, not the statute, literally from the Black's Dictionary. A pardon is an official act of forgiveness for a crime, releasing the individual from legal penalties and consequences associated with that crime. It is typically granted by a high-ranking official like a governor or a president. So let's go over pardon for those of you that aren't completely clear on what he's asking. He meaning Diddy and his team. Diddy's team is asking releasing the individual from the legal penalties and consequences associated with that crime. Takes a different turn. Yes, now it takes it. I see you guys going. It takes a different turn when you look at it that way. So what he's basically saying is, I was convicted, but let's just release me from all of the penalties of having been convicted of this crime that some people may or may not feel that he had done. Somebody said, oh, heck no. I mean, and I'm putting it in, just to laymanize it, just making it simple. That is a fancy way of saying I'm just going to be released from any consequences from this crime. That's why a pardon is done by somebody's asking how, if you're released from that, like how does that happen? Like how do they allow you to be released from that? It's basically has to be granted by a high-ranking official for that reason, because it's a very heavy question to answer. So a governor or president, period. No one else can do this. And it is because of what it's saying. It's literally saying I'm not responsible for a crime that I was responsible for. So under those circumstances, there's a lot of no's coming in there. Somebody said he did something. Yeah, well, that's why he was convicted. But, yeah, and then some people are saying, you know what, they were about that life. You mean they, meaning like the women that or the people that testified against him. Santos 77. What do you mean? Oh, just everybody that was involved in that was about that life. I got you. So everybody said, everybody was about, I'd have to say, let's go over the trial just a little bit, but just the parts enough to apply it to this sort of pardon. It became sort of an understanding. Now, we won't say that this was true, because we were there. But we're going to say it's true just for the sake of argument. Everybody did appear to be about that life. And when you say that term about that life, it's a way of saying everybody was involved with what was going on and understood it. There were no secrets. It wasn't hidden. If you think of it that way, then that took the empathy away from testimonies like Cassie and some of the other, Mia, for example, some of the other women. I think one of the women in there actually said she was living that lifestyle. So, but does that mean you should be pardoned because of it? Does that mean once you're convicted of these sort of prostitution-related crimes, which are still felonies, which are still illegal, which you're still convicted of, does that mean you get to say, yeah, I'm not, I'm going to be exempt from all of it? Tell me what you're saying. Yes, welcome. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that are just coming in, make sure you click the notification bell. I try to come in around the same time each time, but we're talking about Diddy's pardon and him sending that information to what was his former friend, who actually said at one point that they were still friends, but we all know and remember that Puffy did denounce 47 at one point. So this doesn't mean that you can't be friends. Everybody gets mad if they're friends or they don't agree with everything their friends are doing, and they might say something, depending upon what type of friendship you have, if you feel like you're close enough. But they did it in the public, so it made it so we all knew what was going on. let's just break down a little bit more. Here's some details and explanation, okay? Forgiveness of guilt. Okay, a pardon signifies that the individual is no longer considered guilty of the offense and is relieved of the association of legal consequences. This means he does no jail time, right? This means exactly what that is. You're released from it. You're basically saying, you know, we could say released from punishment, for lack of a better description. And that is one of the definitions, right? It says it can mean the individual is no longer subject to punishments such as imprisonment, fines for that specific crime. So a pardon isn't just, let me just ask for a pardon. So I used earlier, as we go back to the story of Tookie Williams, that it's literally the reason why they didn't give him this pardon. And this is a man that would, by definition, fit a pardon based on what he had done for like at least a decade after all these crimes. He was a young man at the time, in his 20s when all this stuff was going on, he meaning Tookie Williams, and he was sentenced to death for having these crimes as a gang member, as a lead gang member. Executed because they said he was convicted of those crimes already, and we can't go back now. This man was executed. He was sentenced to death. So we have another person coming in here. Do you feel his crimes his question of pardon should be actually questioned? Somebody tell me something like that. Not as serious. What do you mean you're saying the crimes, Tookie Williams' crimes were way more serious. But we have the same sort of lifestyle in a weird sort of a way. If you believe, he's convicted now, so we can say there was, so gang members often do multiple crimes. They do murders, they do threats, they do extortions, they do, prostitution, some of them. They do drug dealing, some of them. So did not all of these things come up when we were talking about the trial for Diddy? So going back to the person who said that they were about that life, Tookie Williams and them were about that life. They were just about it a little less public. They were in different positions. Maybe Diddy went about it a different way. Comes from Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? So it's does that mean his pardon was less important? If you look at it that way, you can say they're both in that type of lifestyle at different levels even. But one was maybe more known and the other one was not. And with that, does that make those crimes less serious? Puffy never committed a murder. Puffy is linked to Tupac Shakur's murder. We don't know if he did it, right? He's not convicted. Tookie Williams was convicted. So, you know what I mean? The on the surface, this looks less, right? Maybe. He should stay in jail. They let him off easy already. So you're saying in reference to he already had enough breaks. He meaning Diddy. Why would they not pardon somebody with all those good deeds? You just mean like that he had really repented, or it appeared to be. How do we know Tookie Williams was? No, it was legit. It was legit. That's why so many people stepped in. Because time. He had done. You can't fake for too long. You get a little bit of time to fake. Everybody sometimes in penitentiary type situations or jail type situations fake for a long time. But I don't know, if not almost a decade. It's a little hard to pull off. Let's do a little bit more while we're still talking. All right, so restoration of rights. Okay. In some cases, a pardon can restore civic rights that were lost due to the conviction, such as the right to vote or, hold certain jobs. This is not going to be a problem for it would have been great for Tookie because he would have been able to work, but it's not great for Puffy because he already has that ability. So it will do that it'll restore those things for him if it was considered a loss, but he really doesn't have that as a loss. Some people say they thought he was innocent. That was going on. If you remember, if you even look back at some of my old coverage, you will see a lot of people were like, well, he never really did anything. But you can't go from that point of we feel like he didn't do anything. We can only go, because this becomes a legal process, right? We can go by what he was convicted of. So those of you that are coming in here going all in on the RICO charge, he wasn't convicted of RICO. So I have to remind you, we're thinking legally. I'm only going to give you the facts. So we're talking about how does this work legally if Puffy's legal team is successful in getting him a pardon. Or what he has to do if they don't. So a pardon differs from I'll say it this way because that's a rather lengthy definition. So it's commutation, right? It only reduces a sentence while a pardon fully forgives. So the contrast between the two is, in this case, he's not asking for a sentence reduction as it applies to a pardon. He's asking for the full forgiveness of the crime. Okay? So it's a little bit different than commutation. Okay? In many jurisdictions, a formal application, often called a petition for clemency, is required to be submitted to the appropriate authorities. That answers the question for those of you that were asking, why did his lawyer do it? Because it makes it more formal. Even they didn't call it a petition for clemency. They said he asked for a pardon, but that it's his legal team, if it is in that state, which is California, would have to petition for that. So therefore, it makes sense to have somebody, if you have a legal team, do that. No, so people are going, no, you guys are all feeling like no, most of you. There are people in here saying that he, yes, of course he should have gotten off. But a full pardon, though? For those of you that are like, do you think he should just be exempt from not it's past exempt. I feel like I'm giving it I'm minimizing it if I just say exempt. I feel like to get a pardon says all of these things. Look at all the stuff that it's saying. One thing it does not say, we must clarify this while I start going in on a pardon. It is important to note that the pardon does not necessarily mean the individual was wrongly convicted. So we want to separate that from somebody being wrongly convicted. Okay, it can be granted to individuals who have demonstrated remorse, rehabilitation, and paid their debt to society. That's why at the top of this I use Tookie Williams as the example. Okay, because he had done that for like a decade at that point. He had written children's books. He had given himself to religious beliefs. He had shown and given back to the younger people that had come into that prison. He had he had turned his life around. Legitly. And the crimes that he had committed when you're young and your mind's not fully developed were around that time. This is like an older man now at that point in his life. So that's why I said if we didn't give him a pardon, this is not even to say that you can't ask for one, but the fact that Puffy's asking for one and Tookie Williams didn't get one, if we compare the two and try to put that together, what is he really doing? He's asking his friend for a favor. I don't think that's wrong. I'm all for that. If you're friends with somebody and they can help you out, let them help you out. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying look at the circumstances under what's going to happen if you get a pardon. A pardon does not automatically clear the criminal record. Him working in entertainment, owning his own business probably won't matter as much, but that often requires a separate process. It's called an expungement, such as an expungement, for example. Expungement is a legal process. Thank you for asking the question. The process of basically clearing the record, not the crime. Expungement is clearing the record. Okay, so in this case, what it is saying is that the pardon can be granted and your records still show it. Some say, is that enough? What do you mean? You mean for him to stay out of jail? I mean, to still just keep it on the record, maybe? Yeah, I mean, I don't say that that's unrealistic. But basically, he is being exonerated for this crime if he gets this pardon. It's crazy. Yeah, the story sort of unfolds kind of crazy. Somebody saying, did they prove Rico? They did not prove Rico. But you think they should have? No, not legally speaking. Because remember, you always know when you come to this channel, I tell you, you have to separate. So the meaning of justice is blind, the little lady with the blindfold over her face with the scales of justice type thing. That's what it's designed to remind you of that. Justice is blind, and it doesn't mean that you don't see what's happening. It means that you have to apply whatever you're wanting legally. Not based on your opinion, but based on what is defined in the statutes or defined in the law. So if people think, man, I don't really think he did too much, and, I don't even know why he was convicted of anything. For those people that are saying that, he was. So we have to go from that point forward. We can't look back and say, man, he should have been convicted of RICO and all. No, he was exonerated of RICO. He was not convicted of RICO. So we can't go back and say, well, he shouldn't get a pardon because, he had a RICO charge. No, a lot of people have charges. It doesn't mean you're convicted of the charges. It just means you have them. So he was not. So legally speaking, a pardon can take place for what he was convicted of. You guys see the difference a little bit there? Somebody said they don't care, put him in jail, keep him in jail. Well, he's got already there. He was denied bail. A lot of people fought about that, actually. I wanted to clarify. People were like, oh, he was denied bail. I can't believe they keep denying this man bail and putting him in jail. And do you remember he ran originally? He had access to his own private plane, and he ran. In the eyes of the law, you're not going to forget that. You don't forget stuff like that. You don't just, it's documented. So you can't be like, oh, sure, give him a pardon. Also, the nature of his crimes. The nature of his crimes definitely indicate that he could have been, he meaning Sean Combs, the nature of his crimes could be considered violent. And you wouldn't want to put a felonious, violent criminal, on an anklet. Looking at it from a legal standpoint or looking at it from the judges, that's what the judge has to justify why they make those decisions. So in a case like that, just giving somebody a get out of jail free card, which is kind of what that is saying, you have to justify it. And there wouldn't have been a justification for that because you could have easily pulled out what happened in the beginning, that he had already ran. He meaning Sean Combs. So I just wanted to clear that up. So because people get mad when they hear certain things and everybody was like, what? Or not everybody, but certain people were like, what? That were on Puffy's side supporting him. Couldn't believe that he couldn't get, released from jail, basically. And he was denied at that point and denied multiple times. So just to give you a point of view of how that could have happened. I don't know because I'm not the judge. I don't know what the judge was thinking, but I do know what was factually inside the file. Never heard that story about Tookie Williams? Oh, probably, yeah. It was, so Tookie Williams was old, so older. So he had been out, if he was in his 20s at the time, I mean, that would have been what, like in the 80s, maybe? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't really know his age at the time of his death, but I know that that whole pardon situation was going on at the time, and he was a lot older. So I was thinking maybe around the 80s, and the blood gangs did start around that time. For those of you that are from Los Angeles or even San Diego, is which really in low key the Bloods. As far, I don't know if everybody knows this story, so don't come after me if you're a part of this gang. But low key, the Bloods started in San Diego. It's my hometown. But the Crips were first. The Bloods were started by other gangs, by other people that got together to go against the volume of the Crips. They had a lot of people. And to sort of combat what they were doing. Now, get mad at me if you want to, if you're a Crip, and you'd be like, yeah, that's right. Or those of you that are Bloods are like, what are you talking about? Look it up. Fact check me. I kid you not. Go all the way back, because Tookie Williams was right there towards the beginning. So I'm just low-key little fact right there. How many of you think 47 will give him a pardon? Yes. 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 He's shady. Yes. I'm not reading that out loud. I just read that out loud. No. No. He's just talking. Meaning 47 is just talking. Yes. Oh, so a lot of you, more yeses than nos, I think. Looks like a lot of people think he will get the part. Thinking about how heavy, but you know what? You're supposed to explain your decisions, but hey, 47's a bit of a rebel, so we don't know if he might just do it and not feel like he needs to necessarily follow the explanation part of it. He is, well, because he's currently president. I mean, he's doing executive orders left and right, so you know that, which is very rarely, most presidents don't do that often. Not to say that it's not done. It's just that he just does it a little bit more. Yeah, so we are talking and discussing Diddy's ask for a pardon and giving some sort of legal definitions. I will do it again for those of you that are just now coming in. Thank you so much for being here. A pardon is an official act of forgiveness for a crime, releasing the individual from illegal penalties and consequences associated with that crime. So we're going over that again, just to make sure everybody understands what he's asking for here. He should get a pardon. He should get a pardon. He should get a pardon. Okay, here comes the people that say he should get a pardon. You guys were slow in coming up, but you came up. Yeah. So you think he should get a pardon just because basically he did some stuff, but not to the extent of him having to be in jail for a long period, or felony. He's been in there long enough, basically, is kind of like the general consensus. Oh, because he wasn't convicted of the larger charge. Oh, wow, that's a good way to look at it. So you're saying basically he was released of RICO, which is basically why they had him there. So yes, he was convicted of small crimes, but he was relieved of the larger part of the federal charge. So you're saying, why not pardon him and just let him move forward? Is that what you're saying? Him meeting Diddy. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing necessarily. Yeah, that's a good point of view. Definitely. Do a lot of people agree with that, or there's some people that say yes? Yeah, here comes a bunch of people saying no. But remember, he's already convicted. So we can't go from the point of what we learned from the trial to apply it to whether or not he should get a pardon. It's one of the reasons I wanted to be on here about that, because I wanted everybody to separate them and look at it from a legal standpoint and the realistic nature of him actually getting one. Not if I compare it to Tookie. Well, not just not if I compare it to Tookie Williams. It's just I was just saying at that level it was denied a pardon. At that level of severity. Even though he had turned his life completely around. He meaning Tookie Williams at the time. Yeah, some people are saying Puffy just didn't do enough. You don't feel like it was enough for him to be in jail for a long time. You are okay. Somebody said yes. That's what they're saying. But they feel like you kind of supported him all the way, which is fine. I mean, but this is a separate thing. I mean, it's really just saying not necessarily that you didn't do the crime. It's not saying that because remember, at the end, it may still be on your record, and it doesn't mean that you weren't convicted. It just means the basically the penalties for the crime. All right, questions, comments, and a lot of questions. Okay. No, he wasn't laughing. Somebody said during the trial Diddy was laughing. He wasn't laughing. He was smiling at the juror jury, and he was not supposed to do that. He was actually nodding his head and he was kind of like participating in what was happening physically, and that can make the jurors sway a certain way. So they were telling him not to do that. Basically, that's not usually done in a court of law, because it does tend to, especially if you're a celebrity, it tend to influence the jury. So that's what they were saying in retrospect. So yes, he did. Somebody, yes, he meaning Diddy got a standing ovation when he came back to jail. And it was interesting because I know we all talked about this, in the news, but I know that it's an interesting thing to have a bunch of felons, um, he's almost speaking for them. So they were like, that's what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like there's hope. It's sort of like when OJ was found not guilty. There was like, oh, there's hope, that the legal system can work for you. And then if he gets a pardon, it's gonna be like just a max action because it would be like, for those of you that lost hope, you're in prison somewhere, you got family that's felonies that are felons, and you're like, hey, are we ever gonna get them out of there? It just was that feeling. It came across like they were just feeling a little bit of hope that he could beat that charge, which is a charge I must continue to say that on paper, once that charge is brought, it is almost what would be 100% conviction. It's not. If you look back in history, I did show you some of the trials, and I used John Gotti as the example. That you can beat it if you have a good defense team. Because John Gotti was convicted of one RICO charge, but acquitted of another. And this is the same person with the same type of charges. He was a mob boss, same type of charges. So I was saying that during the trial. I accurate. I'm only good at analyzing because I'm good at analyzing the law. I don't ever come in here and just talk about my opinion. It doesn't matter in the eyes of the law. I only talk about what legally makes sense. And sometimes I get in trouble for it because people go, oh, but what about this and what about that? But it's really that you have to. Legally, he has a right to. Somebody's asking. Yes, legally, he has a right to ask for a pardon. He absolutely does. He meaning Diddy. 47, it's up to 47 if he wants to grant it, but he has a right to ask for one. He meaning Puffy. Wealth of information. So yeah, I mean, this is where we're at with this trial. Not this trial. This is where we're at with this sort of saga of the Diddy life now. Some predictions when he gets out. Do I think he'll go back to that life? It's too public. I don't think so. I think that it depends on the person, right? And I say that as a generic answer, but in truth, it is really the truth. Sometimes people can't help themselves. They get away with something, they get out of it, and then they go right back to the same thing. So, new players, same game. That's how life is sometimes. But some people can really, just realize, yeah, this wasn't worth it, and then just move forward. So you can't say that. I can't say that I know. I really can't. we'll definitely cover it and make sure we understand what's happening at the time. He can, yeah. Can he get it expunged? You're talking about after he gets a pardon or before he gets a pardon? He can't get it expunged within this year time. A pardon would allow an expungement to happen faster. I'll say it that way. I think there is, depending upon the state, a period of waiting time before you can expunge something. I would have to look that up because it's different for each state. So I'd have to look up what California says about it because California does find sealing records and expungement separate, where other states may find it the same thing. So it depends on what state or what the state of California, because this is where this case was, actually says. So I mean, I think it would be vindication for him if he got a pardon, but I mean, maybe personally, and as far as other things, you can kind of say, here, this is what happened, and yet at the same time, I was able to get pardoned from it. A lot of people haven't heard that. You haven't heard the Tookie Williams story? It's if you look it up, you could probably just Google it. I'm sure it's tells you the story because it was quite a thing for a period of time that those gangs had been what they were. How do I know the backstory? I'm from San Diego. It started in San Diego. You didn't have to be around at that time to understand because it was really one of those things that everybody just kind of defined. It's kind of like one of those unwritten things you just knew growing up in that town that was kind of like how that happened, how that turned into what it turned into. And then it got so big that the original story gets lost. Yeah, a lot of people don't know how that happened, and it's funny because it's like the certain cases that start in a certain place that get so big the story gets lost. So if you think of like people were like, oh, Columbine was the first school shooting, and and went all in on the Columbine, and it really isn't. In 1979, Brenda Spencer shot up the school across the street from her house. A woman named Brenda Spencer. This was also in San Diego, but it is accredited to the first school shooting, not Columbine. But the original story gets lost, right? Time passes, other things happen, and people go by what they know. So that's how I ended up knowing. Just we all just kind of knew the story just growing up there, but we didn't really. Yeah. Nobody really thought about it, and it got lost over time too. So as gangs got bigger and started to grow. Somebody said the Bloods were first. I could check that part. I'll check that part. You might sound like you know what you're talking about, but you might just be saying that because you're not a crook. Just kidding. I don't know. Do I allow everybody in here? I don't, if you, as long as you act like you have some sense. I'm not interested in what you've done in your past or what you're doing unless you want to tell it. But you can listen and have an opinion just like anybody else. I just I don't keep the comments for that reason because I have certain people I want in here. Not that. I keep the comments turned towards me because sometimes people get ridiculed or sometimes the people get in arguments and I don't acknowledge that type of drama. I stick to what we're here to talk about. So, or sometimes people just innocently go off topic for like a long written. In the beginning, we used to have like really long, dialogue written to get their question out, and that's fine. But what I end up doing is just condensing it, so everybody can still comment and it not be stopped from scrolling up by this long comment that was there. I don't mind long comments. I just condense them so that you don't have to go through them. You were a Diddy supporter? Wow. You don't think he did anything, Diddy supporter? Because there's many of you don't. I mean, it's more people that don't support what he was doing. How do I feel about... I'll get back to you 1 second. How do I feel about the celebrities not speaking. I actually had this conversation before about what would happen when Diddy gets out of jail and goes back to work. What happens with all of the people that didn't necessarily support him. But the interesting thing about it is his supporters, like, okay, we say Stevie J or, Ray J. They just happen to have J's in their name, both of them. I don't know how that happened, but Stevie J and Ray J that supported him came out and said that. But the people that maybe necessarily we assumed didn't support him actually didn't say anything. You see, Ashton Kutcher, for example, I don't want to throw him under the bus, but was associated with him originally. So I can say that because it was made public. But he never said he was against Diddy or for Diddy. He just never answered. And that was sort of the theme of many people. So at the end, Diddy comes away and he gets pardoned, or even if he just gets out of jail, or all these things happen, he goes back to start his life back again. It's kind of hard to know who didn't support him because they never really spoke. Think about all the people on that list. How many of them actually came forward and talked about it? Who actually came? I'll leave it to you. You tell me who actually came out that was a part of that thing, part of that life, except for Cassie and all of the people in the court case. But that was considered a friend of his that actually spoke against him. You gotta tell me, because I didn't remember anybody. Even 47 didn't say anything bad. He just said, yeah, I might consider pardoning him. I think we're good friends. But matter of fact, he said the opposite. I think we're good friends. But he never said, I was never about that life. I think the closest you can say, other than the obvious 150 cents, but you could say was, O'Shea Jackson. Ice Cube. Because he was like, hey, don't drag me into this. I have never been to a Diddy party. And he actually got pounced on for saying that. When he was just letting you know, I wasn't about that life like that. I've done my stuff. That was back when I was in NWA. And I just moved on from that. So that's not something I'm involved in right now. Or that I got involved in. So he was just letting you know that he hadn't been to one, and then everybody got mad. So that lets you know quietly, like 47, he has more supporters than it showed. Because a lot of people support 47 but don't say they do. Okay, it's just much like a lot of people supported Diddy but didn't say anything. So silence doesn't necessarily mean you don't support. It doesn't necessarily mean that you do. It means that you're just not answering. And that was really, if you look back in retrospect, as we can do now, as this trial was going on, about how many people actually made an actual statement about him. So just to answer that question, because it's an interesting question. It's probably a question that a lot of people have. Is he going to seek revenge when he gets out? But does he have to seek revenge is the question when he gets out. Because a lot of people that, like I said, never said anything one way or the other. Just follow the trail. Follow the trail. If you've got a lot, tell me who said that they flat out will no longer associate themselves with him. It verbally. If somebody has somebody, let me know. Well, it is interesting. It's an interesting fact. So here we are at the point of a pardon where he may be getting out. And what happens next in this saga? Does that mean he goes in on seeking revenge on the people that did speak out against him? You hate Stevie J? You hate Stevie J what, for supporting Diddy? Isn't that his friend, though? Let me play devil's advocate. You didn't say you hate Ray J, number one. And number two, you said you hated Stevie J. Do you just hate Stevie J, period? So no matter what he says, you're probably going to be mad at? Or did you just mean you hated him because he was so supportive of his friend? Because to us, he was just Diddy, right? We don't know him personally. But to him, that was his friend. He was actually at his house at the time it got raided. Stevie J was at Diddy's house at the time it got raided, according to Stevie J. So, I mean, do you just abandon your friend because you don't agree with what's happening? Or do you show a little bit of loyalty and stick by it? I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. You don't support them in their wrong. If you feel like they're wrong, I mean, so what is support then? You support people only when they do what they want you to do, and then you're no longer friends with them? I'm playing devil's advocate. So I'm getting your point of view out because a lot of people might feel like you feel. And a lot of people might feel like the opposite. So I'm doing both sides here. Do you have a friend like that? Since you said you hate Stevie J specifically, if you hate Stevie J because he supported Puffy and he was, he shouldn't have been because of all the things that Puffy was doing. He already supported the things that Puffy was doing by just being his friend in the first place. Because if you didn't, you would have stopped hanging out with him. He was with him all the way through the raids of Diddy's house. And he never once backed away from, this is my friend. I don't care if you agree with what he's doing or not. I don't care if you agree with what I'm doing or not. I'm not, I don't think he's guilty. So therefore I will support him. If you look at it that way, because what you're looking at basically is like, man, this man is doing all kinds of stuff. This is crazy. But you know what the truth is? Even Jeffrey Dahmer had a friend. That came out and spoke, if you remember one of the old school documentaries where they interviewed, fact check me, I lied to you not, where they interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer, and Jeffrey Dahmer's friend came out and said they were friends. The one that came out. But you do need friends like that, because if you do wrong things to let you know that it's wrong, it's not to say that behind the scenes he wasn't saying he was wrong. I think that's why you said I don't like Stevie J versus I like Ray J. You didn't say you like Ray J, but you didn't attack Ray J because Ray J said I don't agree with what he's doing. He said it. And yet he was still supporting him through a tough time. That's why you never mentioned Ray J. And I think, is that correct? If I'm wrong, let me know. I think that's why you never mentioned Ray J. You said, I hate Stevie J. You didn't say I hate Ray J, who was just as vocal. But Ray J publicly said, I don't have to agree with what he's doing. I don't agree with everything that he's doing, but I don't think he did it. So it sort of it made sense that ironically you ended up saying, I don't like Stevie J, but you didn't mention Ray J. So yeah, it's just interesting. Yeah. I mean, she's food for thought. It's food for thought, right? Food for thought. But you didn't like him anyway. Well, there's something to be said about that too. But yeah, so, and this is not to say that you have to, that you would have stood by somebody doing something that you felt was that wrong. You have to stand with your convictions, right? So, but it didn't ever come across like Stevie J thought he was doing anything wrong. Or, Ray J said he didn't agree, but with Stevie J ever saying he did anything wrong. You think that they should have stayed quiet? Oh, yeah, you know what? I feel like it would have made more sense. I think I picked that for that reason. I think that would have made the most sense because here it is someone you spent a lot of time with and you don't really know what they were doing when you weren't there. You don't want to say one way or the other. It's better to just say nothing. Or you could say, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything. So it could have been any one of those things, but I wasn't questioning what they were doing. I was just saying that's what they were doing. I don't know. I wasn't questioning why they were doing what they were doing because you're not in somebody's head. You don't know the reasons why. I was just saying that's the general consensus of what was happening, that a lot of people just didn't comment at all. You're saying, but now, okay, somebody said, but now that he's convicted, do you think they'll now speak out against him? It doesn't look like it. I feel like it would have been like a rush of people just kind of commenting on the verdict, but that were friends with him. And you just don't get that. He had too much stuff on them. Oh, might have some tapes. We don't know. might have forced them to be quiet. That might be a possibility. I wouldn't say no on that. I don't know, of course, obviously we're speculating, but could have been a possibility. Insight? Oh, thank you. I appreciate when you guys say I give good insight because it's part of information and news, and this is a combination of both information and news. So it was that type of trial where you just kept getting informed of stuff that you were like, ah, is that a real thing? Uh, the shock value of the trial was definitely there. It was finding out, that people were just doing stuff on the regular that put a lot of people on the floor. You know what I mean? But it is a lifestyle just like anything else. So if you're living like that, you don't think you're doing anything. If you don't live like that, it is shocking. It's like a person that, real doesn't curse. This happens sometimes. Person just does not curse. They just don't. So every time you say a curse word, it is much more harsh to them than a person that just cusses all the time. The shock value of it depends on how deep you are involved and how much you know about what's happening. And I use something like cursing as an example. Sometimes somebody put F and this and every other word is a curse word and everybody's just sitting in the room just laughing and listening. And then you will sometimes have, in a different environment, that same person saying the same things. And they're like, oh, can you please calm down the curse words, please? I mean, I understand that you say that a lot, but I just don't want to be, becomes an issue. So for people that, such as myself, that don't do all these things, or such as somebody, similar to just not being that deep into something and looking at something like that, it's shocking. Like, ah! You did what? Please tell me this is a lie. But for other people, it was like, no, I might not have gone that far, but, I get the first part of it, I might have called the worker in and all that stuff and maybe watched a little bit, but you know what I mean? It's like, it depends on what degree you were at, whether or not you thought he did a crime, technically speaking. Or you felt that was a crime that shouldn't be broken type of thing. Interesting. Good stuff. The saga continues. Yeah, we're going to probably follow him like we always followed OJ after that. But I believe you can't hide who you are. So ultimately, as we saw with OJ, his violent tendencies came out again. Ended up going to jail for them. Even though he was acquitted of the actual murder, the robbery in Vegas, he actually ended up going to jail for. So he was violent again. So, I mean, it wasn't like you ever really get away with anything, in truth. Not in real life. And some people don't believe religiously speaking, so I'm just saying in general. Karma will come back to you twofold. A consequence, by definition, is something that you don't want. So it's not going to be what you think it is. And that generally is, and I say all that to apply it to those of you that are going all in and he should be locked under the jail and you're trying to decide what his punishment should be for crimes that you believe he did. The reason why other people don't feel like that is because maybe they're at a different place. So, and I'm saying that specifically because we get in a little bit of yelling going back and forth. So I don't want people, I mean, we're getting like a sort of a back and forth without you guys knowing it's a back and forth, but we're getting sort of two sides kind of saying, give the man, why are you on him all the time? He had some prostitutes over. These women were involved in the life. What do you mean? We don't have any empathy, for that situation. They wanted money. They got money. They got what they wanted in exchange for what they were doing. So, that's about as far as that goes. And then you have, of course, other people are like, what the heck? These women were abused. What do you mean? Why are you not, And then you get those people like, I don't want to know about any of it. I can't believe this, we're still talking about this. And yeah, you're here, but that's okay. But they're like, but it's still something that no matter where you are, you still kind of want to know where this is going. Not just because it was salacious, but because it was salacious. Like, truthfully speaking, you're like, can you come back from all of this is really we want to see if the story of comeback can happen in a situation like that. And how does it happen in a case like this? Or are you just forever disgraced? You know, it's kind of the thinking with that. Questions, comments, anything else about the pardon? Anything else about Diddy? Because I'm covering more because I didn't complete I didn't do like one video on the end of the trial like I normally do. I just didn't have the time at the time. Do I think? Oh, you're talking about 50 Cent's his wife? Or not wife, baby's mother. First of all, it was never said that that's who that was. So let's let's even though it was said that it was in the courtroom, it wasn't said. So we can't really we can not confirm nor deny the allegations that it was 50 Cent's ex baby mama or whatever, but it was pretty much said that that's who that was. But legally speaking, it was never said exactly who that was. So as far as the courtroom, she was anonymous, right? She was. I can't remember what her pseudonym was. I think it was like Mia or June or something like that. I can't remember. Yeah, I keep it legal because people say a lot of things and they probably know what they're talking about, but I just don't apply that here because some of it isn't true, and so I don't want to misquote. How long is the application process for what a pardon? Oh, well, it is a petition for clemency, so it's a petition. So you just basically fill it out, turn it in, and then it goes through. Oh, you're talking about the whole process? I don't know. That's a decision once it's handed over to the official, meaning in this case 47. It just I don't know if they are given a time limit. I would have to read the petition. Let's see if I can find out. It's probably easy to find out. Hold on. I'm still with you. I'm just fact checking. So often 2 years or more according to Google. I just Googled it right now. So it says, often it says it's a long process and it takes often about 2 years or more. There you go. Can you expedite the process? Yes, you actually can. I will actually read that. I think it's somewhere here. I think it depends on the specific case, and then what the conviction actually is, if you can expedite it or not. But somebody fact check me on that because I don't know if that's true. Let's see if we have any updates. Let's do an update. Bear with me, I'm still here. I'm looking for maybe if we have an update on anything. So it says here, that the lead attorney, Nicole Westmoreland, I think is her last name, has publicly stated that that team has been in contact with Trump already, with the administration, about this potential pardon. So also the lead attorney discussed about the pardon, but is not made, he discussed with them about the pardon, them meaning the Trump administration, but there has been no decision. So it's already, in a sense, been expedited because they already went and talked to him meaning 47. So that's the only response is still the same. Trump responded by saying, and I'm quoting now, they have talked to me about Sean, but he did not elaborate or say anything else. So Combs' stance was, Combs was convicted on 2 prostitution-related counts. He's awaiting sentencing. It's going to be on October 3rd. He was acquitted once again, of the sex trafficking and racketeering. But Combs' legal team reportedly was hopeful about the pardon. So it shows here that they're actually thinking that it was probably something that was going to go through or get completed for him. And, it would stand to reason. Again, 47 and Diddy had been friends. So, and, some people compare it to the crimes that were actually convicted of. So in Tookie Williams' case, in all fairness, he was convicted of some heavier crimes, but had turned his life around. So I don't know. Do you value the redemption part of it? I think that should have held more weight than it actually ended up holding. That's why we're already in question as to whether or not he's going to go back to what he did. We don't even know at this point. So Williams had already proven it. Somebody that asked that question. Hi, some of you are just coming in. Welcome. Yeah, we kind of were going in on just to let you guys know, we were going in on the pardon for Puffy Combs and a possible pardon. He was not given a pardon. The discussions have taken place and they have been asking for one, they meaning the legal team. We've had quite a few opinions, so go back and look at the first part. I also do define what's happening in a legal standpoint, because I cover everything from the legal angle. A lot of people kind of going in on the fact that he shouldn't get one. What would you do if he did? I mean, it appears, based on the talks that they had, more likely than not. And 47 had already mentioned it. So what are you going to do? What do you think would happen if this pardon actually happened? How much of a change to what happened is it really going to change? Or is it just going to be him able to go on with his life without this sort of scarlet letter? That he will still have, technically speaking, but maybe feel better about having, been released from, especially any financial responsibilities and stuff like that. Him meaning Sean Combs. Somebody said, I don't know. A whirlwind. A whirlwind of what? What do you mean by a whirlwind? Just the case itself is a whirlwind. Or just the situation. It's not even a case anymore. It's just the circumstance at this point. The circumstances of him asking for a pardon is a whirlwind. Does that mean, I like this, does that mean he's not taking accountability? That is why I use Tookie Williams as the example. With not having, and it doesn't mean that he isn't, but with not having not shown over time, could it mean that? Could. It's necessarily, is that? Maybe not. We don't know. Because you can't say what's in somebody's head, right? You don't know why. It could just be that he went through that process and he went to jail and all his dark secrets were exposed and he's had enough. He does not want to keep reliving that on rerun. Right? It could not necessarily, or it could necessarily mean like, hey, I didn't really do anything and I get it that I got convicted, but I don't feel like I did anything. So I need to be, yes, I was convicted. I can't help what they do, but I still don't feel like I did anything. So you can't ever say something like that because you don't know what's in somebody's head. You think he's just not giving it up, huh? You're like definitely saying, nope, he just doesn't want to take accountability. You're basing that on what you've seen of him in the courtroom? Just in general. What you've seen of him in general. Oh, like the type of person you think he is. Well, you just think he's that type of person. We don't really know. No, it doesn't mean that he didn't do bad things. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it definitely doesn't mean that he's not in his own way going to repeat the same thing. Repentance and redemption is not, I'm sorry. That's not enough. People are sorry for a lot of things. To redeem yourself or be repentant of what you're feeling is to not do it again. That's why I feel like we misstep with rehabilitation in areas like prisons and stuff like that. I feel like we misstep because we count a try as actually being repentant. And that's not really a full repentance. It's on the road to repentance. It's on the road to redemption. It's on the road, but you're not necessarily there yet. You're not there yet until you've not done what you were doing before. So if he's guilty of sex trafficking, he has to be on the road to not sex trafficking. If he's beaten women, only he knows what he's done. If he's beaten women and he's done it for decades, he has to be on the road to not beating women. So that's true repentance means he won't do it again. Meaning if you date him, you're not going to have to fear that he's going to hit you if he doesn't get his way. So you know what I mean? So that's why I say, I use that story very strategically because it showed over time that the person had actually repented because he never did it again. He didn't go back to that life. He had no choice. He could have did it in prison. How many people still rep their gang in jail? How many people still rep their gang in penitentiary? You do. So people are like, oh, he went to jail, so therefore he did no crimes. No, he didn't have to not do any crimes. He was probably with people that also were in the gangs he was in. So he could have easily continued that behavior. He, meaning Tookie Williams at this point. He could have easily continued that behavior. What made that story so unique is that he chose not to. Even being in there with people that he once represented. And that's not easy to do if anybody has ever even just seen people from penitentiary. If you just saw a documentary of people in penitentiary, you know you could get killed for that. Don't try to go against the grain in jail. You can get in trouble for that. It's a way to do it. When you feel like, I have nothing else to lose. I'm on, death row. I just don't want to go out like that. So when you have when I think pardon, I say all that to say, I think that. I don't necessarily think like sex trafficking and puffy and all of these things. So, but you do have an advantage if you know somebody that can help you. If your friends are your friends. So I wasn't going against that necessarily or for it. I was just saying that, more than likely, if you're really friends with somebody, you're probably going to help them out. Especially a president like 47. Because he will do it and not care what you think about it. He's just going to do it if he's going to do it like that. Or he won't do it and not care what you think about it. So he's just going to be what that is. He has proven over time, 47, that he's just not going to be caring about what people think. Somebody said if anyone would do it, it would be 47. That's the truth. If it was any other president, they would be like, what? You're asking for a pardon? Like, what are you talking about? Like, why will you not be, held accountable for your crimes? Type of thinking. Like they did during the era of Tookie Williams. Like, why would you not be held accountable? You're already convicted of this stuff. Why are we going to pardon you now? Kind of thing. So, but it was also the death penalty. So that's why everybody was lobbying so hard also because he was, this is not the same thing. There's no death penalty involved. But at that time, it was either yes or this man's going to die type of thing. People did come out and speak for him. Yep, absolutely. People sometimes support anybody. What does that mean? They're supporting people that they think are their friends. I think it's a harsh statement to say you can't support people in anything. You don't have to be involved in it to still, be there for the person. You can. This is when I think empathy can be applied correctly. As a friend of somebody that does something like, okay, we're going to go extreme. Your friend's Jeffrey Dahmer in the past. I use that name because everybody knows who that is. Your friend was Jeffrey Dahmer. And you're like, what the heck? Now, you can disassociate yourself from that because you're like, I didn't know you were doing all that. I know you were eating people and murdering people. I had no idea. But you can sort of go to them and have that final conversation and say, listen, I don't know where you got off track. This is not the person I remember. I'm sorry that you're going through this, but I don't know if I can be here for this. And it's not because I don't miss who I remember, but that's just not who you are, kind of thing. But people will just cut somebody off and keep it moving. You know what I mean? And they're like, wait, what happened? I thought we were friends. There's no explanation, no nothing. And I think if you've been friends with somebody a long time, you owe that to them. At least that. To let them know, no, I've been loyal to you all this time. But now at this point, I just don't know who you are. And I can't take the risk for myself to be around who I see you to be now, type of thing. No, people just cut people off and keep it. It's like kind of it's, if you were friends, I think you owe it to them. So I'm not saying you have to still be around the person. That wasn't really my point. And I wasn't even saying that you had to, be there and in court every day and all of these things. You can still not support what they're doing, but support the person that you knew as a friend. Make sense? I'm not saying you don't need to cut some people off. I mean, if people are in the acts of doing what they were doing, I'm seeing past the fact when it's already said, when all is said and done, right? Because this is the point where we're at now. We already know what Puffy did. When all is said and done, at what point do you still say, I owe it to him as having been his friend? That's why, I think a lot of people were silent, because you don't need to berate the person in the situation. You get those friends too. As we go off onto the, discussion, but it applies to what would happen next with Puffy. Or, I'm sorry, Diddy. I call him Puffy just because I remember Puffy. I mean, I guess he was Diddy at the end, but I remember all his little Mother Love, Puffy Love, and Puffy. That was the one that was around for the longest, and then everybody realized his name was Sean Combs and this type of thing. Diddy came at the end, so at the end of his little reign. So yes, I did say that. Thank you for watching that video. I did say entertainment as a whole is struggling to keep its audience. That includes music and movies. It is struggling. Celebrity is starting to go to wane. So it's in a place of inconsistency and some flux where people's feelings about that changed, because it looks like a lifestyle when we had Me Too finally broke. And then everybody had Weinsteins and Epsteins. We had, political figures being accused of stuff. Every other mogul was being accused of graping. And, even, I would tell you, I was the most shocked about Russell Simmons being accused of that. I was like, Uncle Russell? I was like, what? When did this happen? So, it was just like a lot of things that people feel like all this was looming. What was I intrigued with this place? What was I excited about? Because I'm looking at these people now and I'm looking at them differently. So that's the place we're in. The restoration of that is where we would move forward. So a good example of that is what's happening with Puffy, because sooner or later, this is going to mellow and we're left with what happens next. The legal parts of it. And it's the same thing. When Weinsteins, Epsteins, all this stuff is coming out, people are on islands. People are, committing, crimes, exploitative crimes. We found out, later that it was the exact same thing that was going on in the era of women empowerment with Hugh Hefner. And they started coming out. And so people started telling the truth about what was happening. Because it was hidden for so many, it's built on tinsel. It used to be called Tinseltown. Hollywood was. But what is tinsel useful for? It's decoration. If you go behind the actual uses, what tinsel is used for, it's not really used for anything. And I think that sort of became the thought process when, you had the one girl, what if we just stopped following, all of the celebrities? And that rarely became a thing for a while. Everybody was unfollowing. So you don't get people to jump on a bandwagon like that if they're really believing in something. It means that you're saying out loud what they might have already been thinking. But they didn't have anybody else to share that opinion with. I won't say confirmation because you're not really confirming anything with an opinion, but it's just sort of the opinion became a little bit more of a general consensus. Anything else? Yeah, so thank you for that. I did say that actually, like a long time ago actually. But yeah, I saw it sort of unfolding just very slowly on its own with all of these little elements that collectively came to everybody putting that on question and what the intrigue with that lifestyle actually was. Because at the end of the day, it felt like we weren't being told the truth, the people that were on the outside. Yeah, really, how do you repair that? I mean, they're going to have to, because you can keep burying your head in the sand and putting out movies and putting out songs and, everybody doing what they're doing. But you have to remember at some point people have to purchase and buy. So it goes back to economics, right? Who wants to do all that work and not get paid for it, right? So you have to, it's a relationship that you can put off trying to repair because people are still in the sand. Their heads are still in the sand. But how far can you put that off? At some point you have to confront that this is what's happening and this is how people are feeling. And I may not even agree with what they're feeling. But it's going to affect the bottom line at some point. Whether it's the quality, even people are complaining about the quality of the songs nowadays. The quality of the movies. How fast they go on to, Netflix and all of the streaming. Hulu. I'm not advertising for Netflix or Hulu, but I'm just saying on the streaming sources. So there's just things that people are saying, but they're not putting those opinions together and creating a story about it. So I kind of did that a little bit in that video, but more has happened since then. So it's kind of like you kind of see people not wanting to let it go. Like, we can't believe that these people that we were running around admiring, wanting to be like, looking at that screen, back in the golden era, like, I would like to be like that, were actually the nothing like what we thought. And I'm talking about the industry as a whole. So when the minds of the consumers start to feel like that, it should be addressed, because all they're going to do is stop doing what they were doing. And you'll see this slow, downfall without you paying attention to how to stop it. It will progressively get worse. Now, we know that in business every day. If you look at entertainment, which is in front of the word entertainment business, behind that entertainment is actually the business. So the entertainment part doesn't suffer as much as the business suffers. So when you start seeing that, I was saying in that video, it's the benefit of the business part to start paying attention to what these people are saying. They're no longer being entertained in the same way. You see? So that's kind of what I was talking about then. It's not related to the Diddy, only in the fact that he's an entertainer and he works in entertainment industry. And the same thing with, the record company, if we're realistically speaking, started to show signs of indifference even way back in Napster days, as people remember Napster. Some people don't remember them fondly because they actually, gave birth to all of these, downloads, Spotify type thing, which for a classic consumer that would actually buy a record. And we can talk a little bit about that. It's a whole nother video, but isn't as impressive. So you have to keep that in mind when you're trying to rebuild the business part of anything. Who's buying the records? Who's actually paying? Where the money actually is. And it's not really going to Generation Z. They don't have money. So it's going to somebody else. So you got to figure out who those somebody else's are. Same thing with the movies. Yeah, I mean, not to go into a whole nother subject, but yeah, I mean, I say all that to say that I was addressing the person talking about that. I said that in my video, and that's what I was actually saying in the video, just to give a more of a longer explanation. Okay, so if those of you are paying attention, we're going to go into a little bit of Q&A, but not too much today because I don't have a lot of time. But consider that part. So if you were looking at just the Puffy pardon, you can probably cut the video off, maybe like a little bit back. So cut it off at the end when I defined expungements and what the pardons would do. When I started talking about Stevie J and all that, we're kind of digressing into a different subject. We're starting going into more of Q&A. All right, so there you go. Hi, thank you for staying. Thank you for joining us. This is video. You came later, but which we're happy to see you. All 5 of you. Yeah. So any more Q&As, any questions about any videos that I've done, I'm just going to take a couple of them, and then I will have to end it. Not as long with Q&A this day, but what I said about entertainment was interesting. Yes, because I cover everything in a business perspective. So I think about, what the end result actually is. So I'm a big picture person versus the little detail. I learned to look at the details because you have to, but at the end, I always go with what the bottom line is supposed to be. So yes, that's an interest. Somebody said, isn't the bottom line supposed to be to breed celebrities? And in a sense, not like the golden era. Remember, they had contracts. So what they were doing was taking care of their workers. It's going to sound interesting for about 5 seconds. They worked for the studio. That's why the golden era was so perfect like it was. That you had etiquette classes and publicity classes, and you had a place on the lot, and all of those things happened during the golden era because you worked for the studio, and the studio needed to protect its I don't want to say it like you're a commodity, but wants to protect its people. But it changed. That didn't happen anymore. After a while, you didn't work for studios. You just worked as an individual independent actor. And then there was a time when we went through this period, and I think people forgot, where American Idol came out, and we didn't necessarily, the popular one that was picked didn't necessarily have talent. As a matter of fact, you didn't need it to be on TV. You didn't even need it to have an audience. Condom Style, for example. Chocolate Rain, for example. That's not to say that they were bad, I'm just saying. They weren't, I mean, if you compare Condom Style to the OJ's, or something like that, or Mariah Carey's vocal levels to, Chocolate Rain, you're probably going to be like, wait a minute. I mean, if you can compare the two, you know what I mean. The quality of the vocals. So you didn't necessarily have to have talent anymore. And then reality television said you didn't even have to do anything. So when you allow that to happen, when you will see the decline happen over time. And I feel like, and I fear that these industries don't like to see that. So they just pretend it's not happening. It looks like now they're still putting out movies that they intended on putting out 5 years ago. They're still following the same strategic plan that they were wrapping up, 4 or 5 years ago, without recognizing that what happened in between there did affect the actual consumer. You see, they're still operating in some cases as if social media doesn't exist at all. News mediums do that a lot. So I was saying, and continue to say, that if we keep pretending like this stuff isn't happening, we're going to have a whole nother set of problems. Much like the music industry, people will turn to other mediums to watch the news or to watch, a movie or to hear a song. You'll start going to people that aren't traditionally able to be seen by those what we were now calling institutions, right? Yeah, I mean, I like the subject. You know, it's a fascinating subject to me. So I kind of go there with that, and just business is always a good subject for me. Finances, economics. I am a nerd that is actually interested in these things. So actually I actually find these topics fascinating, and it's like it might not be that way for everybody, but truthfully speaking, I speak about them passionately because I find it interesting, and I do look for trends and stuff like that. And I started to see like, okay, so Hollywood, you guys wake up, because it's not, people aren't viewing you the same. So you should adjust if you want to continue to not just do anything, or you need to adjust to follow the market trends, for a lack of a better description, right? And same thing with the movie and the music industry, because we're going to get to the point where we're tired of just hearing anything. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will get to the point where we're like, oh my god, this movie's, what they call them, trash. This movie's trash. Oh, I'm so sick of this movie. Or what, this is terrible. Like, what is she singing about? Like, I don't even care. Like, who's vocal? This is not even talent, like, you kind of go in that way. And we got away with it with Madonna, so no disrespect to Madonna, but she wasn't the vocally strongest person, and she wasn't the greatest dancer. But her songs were catchy, you know. And she did a lot of stuff to promote herself. So she became an icon. And that happens occasionally, but it's more often than not that these icons, or these people that are becoming, that we're claiming are going to be legends, if you really look at them closely, it makes you do a double take, where before a lot of times in years before, you didn't have to do a double take. You think Taylor Swift is overrated? Oh, I'm not saying TW. I don't want to say anybody's name, but it depends on how old you are, I'm sure. Well, I don't know how old you are, but you sound pretty old. So probably it depends on, we, like I said, I don't know what era you're in, but you sound like you're older. So I would think that you were probably, there was one from pretty much every era. There's like a Madonna, there was disco for people in the 70s, in the 60s, you got a lot of like Bob Dylan, so they weren't the best singers in the world, but there was something about them that took them over the top, but it wasn't commonplace as it is now. It was like they were the exceptions to the rule, or people like that were the exceptions to the rule. I'm not sure what era you were in. I didn't want to date you, but just, if you're in one of those decades, I gave those examples. Not to say that you're super old. You could be young. I don't know. You just sound like you were older. You are? Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Taylor Swift is poppy. Are we gonna don't get on a Taylor Swift kick, because we're not talking about Taylor Swift specifically. We're just saying what's happening in the business part of it. All right, you guys. So I feel like, yeah. Oh, we're going into a way another subject. Okay, so I will do a subject on this. We'll talk about this, and we'll give us more time to ask more questions and sort of deep dive into one of these. And I'll give it, the time that I give these the stories that I give, like Puffy and crypto, digital currencies and all of these things. Okay, thank you so much. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, you guys, for being here. Keep an eye out. We're gonna see if Puffy gets a pardon. Um, Thank you so much, you guys, and out. If you hear that, see you next time.